need your phone.
Oh.
All right. Okay. Hello. My name is Ramon. This is going to be an interview for my anthropology class on cultural diversity. And more specifically, my topic is third culture kids, what that means, and how that can affect them, and how culture transfers from parent to child when growing up in a different country than them. If you have any questions or feel uncomfortable answering any of these questions, let me know. But first question is, what is your name, age, and ethnicity?
Okay, my name is Bianca. I'm 21 years old and I am Asian, so Filipino. Yeah.
And are you familiar with the term third culture kid?
Yeah, I am.
And do you identify with it?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Where did you grow up and where are your parents from?
So I was born in San Francisco, but I grew up in Benicia, and my parents are from the Philippines. So my mom's from Cagayan Valley and my dad's from Isabela.
Did you experience, or would you say there's a lot of cultural diversity where you were growing up in Benicia and San Francisco?
No, not at all, actually. In Benicia, it was predominantly white, so there were only a few people of color that I was exposed to growing up.
All right, next question is, do you feel more aligned with either your Filipino or American culture in terms of values and traditions?
I feel like in terms of values and traditions, I would say I'm more in line with my Filipino culture. I feel like I'm kind of stuck in between though, but leaning more towards Filipino, like regarding my beliefs and traditions and stuff, my values.
Okay, so you'd say you're familiar with like Filipino culture.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are important values from it?
I would definitely say like generosity, like being super giving, putting the needs of others before yourself. Definitely family is an important aspect. One of the most major aspects, food.
Okay.
would be like showing your love through food, and just taking care of each other and looking out for each other, I would say.
Okay. So you'd say that culture is very important to you and your family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Did you ever feel not Filipino enough to someone or not American enough?
Sorry, what was the question?
Did you ever feel not Filipino enough or American enough to anyone?
I definitely, like personally, I don't feel Filipino enough still to this day, like in certain aspects. And with my mom too, she's even said it before. She was like, "Oh, you're Americanized,"
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So I definitely could see like how she doesn't see that I'm like Filipino enough, or how I'm not validated as Filipino enough.
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a problem, especially when you don't know Tagalog.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like, it's like seen as like, oh, you don't know Tagalog, you're not as Filipino as someone who...
Yeah. There's a lot of disappointment too when like other Filipinos ask you like, oh, do you know Tagalog and stuff, and I'm like, I can mostly understand and speak a little bit, and you can see the disappointment.
Yeah.
So that's also very invalidating too.
Has anyone gotten upset at you before because you didn't know Tagalog?
There was one customer that I had before at my job, and she was like a Filipino grandma, and she asked me if I speak Tagalog or if I was fluent, and then when I said no, that I can mostly understand or speak, she was like, you guys don't, you need to know, otherwise you're not, she was like, or you're not good enough. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but also, like, we grew up here.
Yeah.
And we didn't have the, I guess, resources to learn Tagalog when we were younger. Or our parents didn't have time to teach us because they were always working.
Yeah.
All right. Did you feel you had to change anything about yourself to fit in more with the crowd or, like, social settings due to your culture, like, in school or work?
So I remember growing up, I would have some like like for my lunch, I would have Filipino dishes and stuff,
Mhm.
and then it did not look like the other kids'
Yeah.
food. So then they'd be like, oh, they'd be looking closely and be like, oh, what is that? And you can tell that they kind of had like maybe it was like a mix of curiosity, but also like kind of like disgust, like, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
While they have their like PB&J sandwich or something.
Yeah.
You know, so I definitely felt like after that I was like, oh, I just want to have like, I told my mom I want to have like regular school lunches and not like ones with rice and a dish or like, you know, so definitely that.
All right. Did you ever find it difficult to find community? If so, where or and did you ever find it?
I definitely found it. I think in high school, but more so in college. It was difficult growing up in a predominantly white town. So in our class, there were only a few people of color, and once you found the other person of color, like the other Filipino, it was kind of like you stuck together. So, but that was very rare. But more so in high school and college, that's when I was able to find a lot of my community.
So would you say like moving out of Benicia helped you find that community, or just meeting new people even in Benicia, or even when you still lived in Benicia?
When I still lived in Benicia, I feel like I had to know someone who introduced me to other people. So, but then once I moved out of Benicia, I didn't need to have like kind of like a link, like a chain link that I had to know someone in order to meet all these people, all these other Filipinos.
Okay. Do you think that there was a strain on you and your parents' relationships due to like a culture gap, and what kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like there are some things, like for me personally, I have tattoos and I have piercing, like I have nose piercing, belly button piercing, and to my parents, they were so mad at me when I got tattoos and piercings, because they were like, why would you ruin your face with that nose piercing? Why would you get a tattoo? Or why would you get tattoos? It just looks dirty. And people who have tattoos, like, we know them for being from jail and stuff. So it definitely, and I would explain to them that I like to, it's like art and like a little jewel in your nose, you know? And that I personally like for myself. And then my mom was saying like, you need to tell me before you do these things. It's disrespectful to me. And then I was like, but it's on my body. And she was like, it doesn't matter. I gave birth to you. You know, I'm your mom. Like, so that kind of thing, like doing something that they don't necessarily agree with and then viewing it as disrespect. Because you're doing something that they don't like.
Yeah, because I feel like family is so important that you need to talk to them before making like a major decision in your life. So they just expected you to talk to them. But I also think that with tattoos and piercings, it's like also a culture gap, but also like a generation gap. Like just like, because older people in general, like even in the United States, in my experience, they don't like tattoos as much, or they don't have as much tattoos, or they don't really like piercings. But I think it's back then the thinking was like, oh, you won't get a job. But now that generation's kind of like retiring, and I guess like getting out of the workforce, our generation's growing up and we're okay with tattoos and we're okay with piercings, and now it's being more acceptable. All right, next question. And on the spectrum of individualistic and collectivistic, which side do you lean on? Because, I mean, I know you said that you are more in touch with like Filipino culture, but you also like got piercings, you got tattoos,
so
like you also moved out. Like that's not a very like
Filipino.
Yeah, like most Filipinos, like at least in the Philippines, they live with their family
until they have
kids, and like even when they have kids, they live next door.
Household. I would say, okay, in that case, I would say more individualistic, because I feel like because like I'm living my life for myself and for like, you know, my future and stuff. And then of course I want to make my parents proud and my family proud in general, and also value the traditions and beliefs and values that I was brought up to practice. But I feel like if it's like my life, I want to be able to do things that make me happy.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I'm living for just the approval, the constant approval from my parents, then I would be restraining myself from learning more things about myself and like doing things for myself. And it would just be like they're living through me instead of myself living through me doing things for me, if that makes sense. Especially with like a lot of immigrant parents, like when they move here and you see like all the sacrifices they make, you want to make them proud and make them happy, but it's like hard to make them happy because what makes them happy doesn't necessarily make you happy. Yeah, that's true.
So you kind of have to like pick who you're gonna make happy, if that makes sense.
In certain in certain aspects, and then try to make a compromise.
So it's like kind of fighting like individualistic like tendencies and collectivistic tendencies, like but yeah. And then because like the Philippines is so collectivistic, like as we talked about before, like family is so important. Do you consider that like toxic to a point? Like they say like family is like the most important, but do you think that can be toxic as well?
I definitely think that it could be toxic in many ways. I know that in my personal experience, and also just hearing from my other friends' experiences in their families, because the saying of like family first is always emphasized. Yeah. But in the case where there are family members who disrespect you or like hurt you, like on in any kind of way, like abuse you or anything, some family members in some cases like they kind of dismiss it, or they say, oh, that's still your cousin, or that's you still have to respect them, that's your lola, you still have to respect them, or anything like that, that's still your uncle, like he's still your family and stuff. So and even like in my personal experience too, like talking to my dad about some things that made me like uncomfortable with certain family members, how certain family members would make me feel uncomfortable. My dad would kind of be like, he probably didn't mean it like that, or you know, so kind of like, oh, he's your uncle, you know. I feel like it's kind of dismissive and validating, and just because of the whole family first, or that's your family, that's your blood, I feel like it definitely can be toxic in many ways. Yeah,
I feel like the thing that my mom always says to me, it's like, oh, like you're always gonna have your family, like you don't know like if everyone else is gonna be there for you,
that's
but you're always gonna have us.
Too. She says like, I had to talk to my mom about that too, because I was like, because personally for me, I said friends are the family that I choose. You know, and my mom and my dad like had a lot of trust issues with other friends growing up, and even in their adulthood. So they would say like, you know, at the end of the day, who's really gonna help you? Are your friends gonna help you? Or like all, you know? And then I'm like, like they are helping. They are. So I feel like it's just kind of I feel like it's kind of complicated in that sense, where they don't really also understand that friends are the family that I personally choose for myself. So and it's like, I don't know, I feel like to a point they also, at least with me, like family like won't help you to a point, because like if I don't know, like maybe if I came out to my parents, like would they accept me? Like that's like such a big thing that I've like like what is true? That's true. I actually personally like have an experience with that too, where when I came out to my mom, and she was like, there was just like, I don't know what her line of thinking was, but there was like a clear like, we were not understanding each other. She was like, I don't get it, like I don't get how that, you know. And I was just like, would you still love me and stuff? Or like, do you still love me? And she was like, well, I have no choice. And I'm like, well, that kind of hurt. So I completely agree with that.
Okay, and then last question. Oh, and on a happier note, do you have any traditions, Filipino or American, that you'd like to pass on that was taught to you, maybe to your children or to, I don't know, your nephews, nieces, anything that you want to keep in, I guess, the culture that you make?
So I definitely want to continue the tradition and like just the value, the cultural tradition of showing love through cooking, through eating together. So I definitely want to get my kids involved in the and just my whole entire family involved in like for example, rolling lumpia. Like it's a lot of work, and I feel like it would be so nice for all of us to just be in the kitchen, do like helping to complete a task and like cooking or just like cooking together, eating together, and just catching up when we're like, you know, talking, joking around the table, just eating. I think it's just the whole aspect of emphasizing the importance of family, and just being together. I feel like it's so warm to have like such a big family to be surrounded by, even if they're not your blood relatives, but we still like, oh yeah, that's your cousin, even though they're not.
Exactly.
You know, so I feel like for the Manny Pacquiao fights, like the how all of us,
everyone is screaming,
all the family, like all the family would be in the living room just together, and just I feel like that was just such a warm and comforting memory that I've always had from my childhood.
Yeah, and I feel like what our parents like didn't give us, we know to pass on, like because our parents were so like, I don't know, collectivistic, or maybe they were too, I guess, like religious. They don't believe or don't accept everything that we do. But now we know like how that feels and how we shouldn't do that to maybe people we're mentoring or helping when they're growing up. But okay, actually this is the last question. Do you know any similarities between, or can you think of any that between Filipino and American culture?
Between Filipino and American culture, I would say food as well. Food. Let me think.
Because they're pretty different.
They are pretty different.
America is very individualistic compared to the Philippines.
That's really hard. I'm trying to think. I'm like, oh, okay, respecting your elders, but then I definitely know some like.
I know people who don't call their parents mom and dad, and they call them by their names, and I'm just like, that's crazy. To me. Or like, you know, like taking care of your family, like no matter how old they get, because I know some like in American culture, I didn't know that before, that it was normal to just put your like parents when they get old to put them in living homes. I didn't know about that until like I started growing up, and then I was just like, I personally would never do that because I would rather have them like with me in my home where where they're still able to be surrounded by family and not being taken care of like by people who don't really know them. You know what I mean? So it's like they took care of you and then you take care of them when you Plus, like, living homes, like, one, they're expensive, and then two, like, they're not nice. Like,
that's true.
I mean, maybe there's probably are some nice ones that maybe be really, really expensive, but like, it's almost like unattainable for most people. But I also, like, even me thinking about it, it's hard for me to think of similarities between American and like Filipino culture. Being born in the Philippines and like growing up here, I'm just like, I don't know.
I was literally trying to think, and then I was like, no.
But okay, thank you, Bianca. This is Bianca, and that was the end of the interview. Okay.
Thank you for interviewing me.